So I'm going to do a short introduction. I'm excited today to introduce Michelle Henderson. She is the owner of Bad Cat Digital. And today the topic that she will be presenting on is improving ROI with social media. So Michelle started Bad Cat Digital to help small business owners navigate the digital marketing space, now with a team that is experienced, creative, and growing. Bad Cat is able to do so very much more with the transparency and integrity that businesses look for in long-term partners. Her Mario Kart score is the lowest at Bad Cat, but she perseveres. From getting clients to rank better on Google search results to discovering creative ways to communicate their brands on social media, Michelle has helped hundreds of businesses in the last 12 years grow through their digital marketing. The Bad Cat Digital team has enjoyed tremendous growth every year and is now loving their new home in the historic Hunsinger building down in downtown St. Cloud. So thank you, Michelle, for being here and presenting for us today, and I will pass it over to you.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for signing up, and thank you for having me, Alyssa, and the MMA staff. I'm really excited about today. We're going to be focusing on several things. I'm going to talk really fast, so I'm going to try not to, but I just do end up that way. So as we go forward today, what we're really looking at is business to business marketing, and is that, like, how is it different? What do we think about that's different, especially as it relates to social media, how social media fits into that kind of overall strategy. Then we have a math section with some formulas in it for you about calculating ROI and some other different kinds of things. And then we talk about how to improve the math, how to make it a little bit better and improve that ROI. And what efforts can really do that. So that's what we'll talk about today. And I look forward to any questions. I'm going to do my best to leave time at the end for questions. And as with anything, it's a mixed group. And so we're going to start by talking a little bit about business to business marketing and how it differs from business to consumer marketing, and kind of keep moving from there. So some of you might be familiar with some of this, and it might be brand new to some people. So we'll get started. This is something that I think might be familiar to most people. This is a general marketing funnel, and for everything from where I got my cup of coffee this morning to what car I purchased last, to, as a business owner, how we choose our print vendor. All of that comes through a decision-making funnel that looks something like this. I become aware that I have a need. I consider my options, do some research. I choose and converts into a customer or not. And then I choose whether or not I want to return. And that is the basic marketing funnel. I'm sure you've seen different versions of this. It's very simplified, but the big difference between when we're talking about business to business marketing is that it's just a lot more complicated, right? So there's a lot more research stages. There's a lot of talking with stakeholders and team members. There's a lot of groupthink. There's signing up for product demos or tours, or somehow creating some sort of scope of work that needs to be created before we can request a proposal, reviewing the proposal with other stakeholders, signing contracts, legal reviews, all kinds of extra steps involved in this funnel. And at every stage, every time we add a step, there's opportunity for people to leave. So when we're talking about marketing, we're not just talking about how do we get more people to the website, or how do we get more followers on Facebook, or how do we get more followers on LinkedIn. We're talking about how do we stopgap this entire funnel? How do we really impact our return on investment by looking at the whole, and what part and piece does social media have inside of that? So what we're going to talk about today is what's referred to as an omnichannel approach. And again, this might be language that's very familiar to some of you. I really think about marketing as kind of a wheel, and the digital, especially with the website as the hub of that wheel, with your business's website as the hub of that wheel. And then the spokes of that wheel are things like the different channels of marketing you have. Everything that's digital, LinkedIn, maybe it's your digital ad strategy. And maybe it's other things too. Maybe it's trade magazines or trade shows, or, some other kinds of, maybe it's email marketing, maybe it's mailing, maybe it's referrals and networking. All of those things are spokes on that wheel. And this omni-channel approach, or thinking about it holistically, is really about embracing and understanding where social media fits in that whole. And I say we work harder than our customers, because that's the job, right? Especially on digital, the easier everything becomes, the easier we expect it to be. So what is the role of social media in all of that? Well, social media fits in that funnel, in that kind of research or consideration phase. So if we think back to that kind of second step on the consumer funnel, and the second and third step on the B2B funnel, that research and consideration phase, that's when people are engaging in social media, right? That's when they're looking us up, they're looking at our reviews, they're checking the quantity of them, they're checking the frequency of them. I mean, has it been 6 years since you've gotten a review? And especially when we're talking about business to business, I think business owners are particularly savvy, and consumers are getting much more savvy with understanding reviews holistically, especially when making large decisions, rather than, reading that one bad one or that one really good one and thinking that that's the end all be all. But this is our opportunity to share our subject matter expertise, to share our thought leadership. This is our opportunity to show our customer service standards through how we respond. Do we respond? This is an opportunity to show our core values through the kinds of, if you have a core value of partnership, or you have a core value of communication, how does that live in your social media content, and how are you showing that throughout? So when we talk about the role of social media, it really fits in that research or consideration phase. And that's the thing that really gets people about ROI and different digital avenues or digital tools, is this concept of if I post something on LinkedIn, does that mean I'm going to get a sale from that post? Well, that's just really not how we think about it. That's not how that really works. And there are so many steps between that second phase and the 10th phase. And so much can happen along the way that's really not the question that we want to be asking. At the end of the day, when we're talking about business to business, what I hear a lot is, I'm not interested in talking to people, I'm interested in talking to decision makers. Well, I hear you, but decision makers are people, right? And what are people? People are mobile. People are on their mobile devices all of the time. People are distracted. There's a lot going on in the world, and we really only get their focus for a certain amount of time. It's one of the reasons I appreciate a whole hour with you guys today, because this is a lot. That's a lot to give up. People are overwhelmed. People are tired of being sold something, especially decision makers. And if you are on a decision-making team at work, I guarantee that you're not necessarily welcoming every phone call from every salesperson that happens to call once in a while. That we're tired of kind of being sold, and we're interested in connecting, and we're interested as people in those kind of partnerships and what can overcome the needs we have, who understands those needs. And social media gives us as businesses the opportunity to communicate that we do understand those needs, that we understand our customers' pain points, that we understand what our audience is looking for, and that we understand that, and here's how we understand it, and here's how we provide it and address it. So social media gives us the opportunity to show what we do over and over and over again in a variety of different ways. And therefore, our potential customers, our potential clients, who are people before necessarily they're decision makers, we're there when they look for a pertinent message, and we're in the path that they're already on. And by thinking about this as an omni-channel approach, we think about all of those paths that people take and all of the spaces that people spend time in, and then say, well, these are the most likely ones that our people are going to spend time in. So we're going to put time and energy into those with these pertinent messages. I wanted to talk a little bit about two campaigns that were really successful B2B campaigns in social media. And these are not from this year. These were a few years ago. So there's been some really good research around them since. But Lenovo, if people are familiar with Lenovo, who really took this omni-channel approach and kind of made it something that that was very impactful for them. They're an IT service provider. So they work with IT teams professionally. Their target audience would be a CIO, decision makers in the IT space. They created 6 videos and accompanying comic books, which is kind of frankly brilliant for their core audience. But the campaign was called Users Happen. And this is a quite discussed and talked about campaign in digital marketing spaces. So these 6 videos were about 6 different professional IT users, not IT professionals, but users that are particularly hard on equipment. In this particular, the screenshot here is of Jane, who is the multi-user who's pretty hard on her equipment and keeps losing dongles. And there's actually a great spot in one of the videos where the IT guy that she calls for help just opens up a drawer that says dongles for Jane. So it's pretty funny. But they're funny, engaging videos. 10 months this campaign ran, and they disseminated this campaign on a variety of platforms. So they utilized LinkedIn and YouTube heavily. They had their website as the core of the campaign. They utilized display advertising, and they also utilized email. And they reported, this is their report, they reported a 250% lift in leads from this campaign. And really, when we think about what is the role of social media in this campaign, it's not necessarily to say that that they wouldn't have had equal success or more success if they had also used Twitter, or they had also used this other channel, or maybe they had used this channel instead of that channel. But really, the concept here is that the content is engaging. They committed to the channels that they use. They engaged meaningfully on those channels, and they created an omni-channel campaign that kind of all roads led back to the website, led back to how to become a lead, how to raise your hand and say, hey, yeah, we're appreciating that you understand us, Lenovo. So it's a pretty cool campaign. If you're a fellow advertising dork who loves watching the Super Bowl ads more than the Super Bowl, I would definitely look it up. The videos are actually pretty funny, but not everybody is that kind of a dork. The other campaign I wanted to talk about was Caterpillar, and Caterpillar or Cat has done some really interesting things in business to business, and they've actually developed product lines that are kind of almost a lifestyle brand for consumers, right? With their clothing lines and their shoes and some other kinds of things, but primarily they are a manufacturer. They are a heavy equipment manufacturer. They have a dealer network that sells their machinery. And they created a campaign with 7 different videos in it called Built For It. And Built For It was a campaign that showed their machines in a variety of scenarios and situations to show them to advantage. So instead of a salesperson sitting next to the machine on video talking about this particular machine, how nimble it is and how it turns tight corners and talking through the specs of that. Instead of that, they sent the machine into a China shop and recorded it navigating through a China shop and flashing the amount of money that the China was valued at as it recorded, as it wound through. It's actually a pretty cool campaign. This campaign lasted over a year. It was a YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn campaign. And it's, all roads kind of led back to that hub of the wheel of the website. They utilized display advertising as well as email. They didn't publish numeric results for the campaign, but I watched an interview with the brand manager during the campaign, and he said it was historically huge increased demand among our dealer network in the interview. So it really worked out well for them. They're very, very proud of it. They also utilized some social media influencers on some of these channels, but really the core concept here is, again, engaging content that deals with the pain point, and then also is done in this omni-channel approach across multiple platforms, including social media, but not exclusively social media, with this consistent message that's not siloed. So it's not like they were talking about a different thing over an email or a different thing on the website, but it was a consistent message throughout. So as we are talking about the campaigns themselves and kind of where social media plays in those campaigns, we have to be looking at whether or not something is working. And the challenge with return on investment, or calculating return on investment, is that it looks backwards. It doesn't look forward. And so it's really hard, especially when you're talking about a funnel this long and this complicated, to predict return on investment. And therefore, how do we make decisions about what we want to try, what we want to engage in, and whether or not what we're working on today is going to work, because we might not be able to measure it for months. And so if we think about a funnel like this, let's break it down. And rather than thinking about it like a funnel, let's think about it like something more linear, like steps through a path. And then let's add a timeline to that. So let's start really thinking about this as a bicycle, and let's think about it like a timeline, right? And when we think about that in business to business, the timeline really stretches. The amount of time it took for me to decide where to buy coffee this morning was about 32 seconds. And really, my $6 cup of coffee is nothing compared to maybe a multi-million-dollar energy contract, or working with, I see there's from St. Cloud Window here, doing some kind of huge glass proposal for a building. So let's figure out that timeline, right? And it's going to be different for everybody, and it is going to be different in different situations, but you can find that timeline for your business, and you can at least kind of guess at some of the gaps. And it's really important to understand that timeline, because how do you measure marketing efforts that start at the beginning of that timeline by what's happening at the end of that timeline if you don't give it enough time to get all the way through, right? The other space that we kind of look at this in like this is there's elective surgical spaces with consumers, where there's big gaps from the time somebody raises their hand to the time they're able to get surgery. And maybe it's a 6-month gap, and there's maybe 17 steps along the way. And at any point, somebody could drop out. So how do you measure marketing efforts that you did in January when there's no possibility that anybody's going to have surgery until at least June? You need to measure from January to February what you did. So how do we do that? And that's what this is about. So when we look at this, I actually just pulled this together for our business, because we sell to other businesses. So we market to other businesses, but this is something that you can be looking at as well. So from the point of time that somebody is aware they might have a need, they may be searching out potential solutions. They might attend a webinar. They might do some other kinds of things that they're interested in. They might read some blogs. They might go out online, but that might take about a month, right? They're going to look for potential solutions, make a short list in their head of either the path that they want to take, or the companies that they like, that they want to work with. They're going to think about who they know, who might know those companies. And this all is going to happen in this space, this awareness phase. Then we get into the research phase. And this is the research phase where they've maybe, already taken a few things and said, that's not going to interest me, and I'm out of that one, and that's not my thing. But this is really a good thing. And they start to narrow down that list. And again, that might take another month, another 30 days. And now I'm going to take that that research that I've spent time doing, and I'm going to share it with my team. I'm going to share it with the stakeholders, the other people who are involved in making this decision. Other than the very smallest of small businesses, there's teams making these choices, teams making decisions in B2B spaces. So I'm going to share that with my stakeholders. We're going to have some discussion. They're going to need some time to research it. And then we're going to come to a conclusion. That might take another month. And now I'm going to sign up for a product demo. I'm going to fill out a form. I'm going to raise my hand. I'm going to call the thing. I'm going to request a tour. I'm going to do all of that. And that's going to take another 7 days. Then maybe that turns into a proposal. I request a proposal, review the proposal with the stakeholders. All of that's going to take a few more weeks. And now the contract has to go into legal review. So when we're talking about this timeline, we're talking about a 4, 6, 8-month, maybe even longer timeline. And how do we measure our marketing efforts from month 1 when we can't measure our sales until month 7, right? So that's part of that. As we're doing that, we're going to look for key performance indicators for each path along this, this timeline, each step of this funnel. We're going to be looking at what are the tools that we're going to use, and what are the things that we're going to measure for those tools as we take these steps, because we can't measure return on investment until we're actually measuring each stage of the funnel along the way there, which then we can't do if we haven't identified our funnel, right? So if we're in that awareness phase, this is where things like search engine optimization, search engine marketing, this is where this matters, and things that we're going to look at in terms of key performance indicators. Not exhaustive list, by the way, everybody, but things that we're going to look at: rank, we're going to look at clicks, we're going to look at visits to our website, we're going to look at click-through rate, and all kinds of other things that have to do with ads. And it depends on what we're running. Those KPIs depend on what tactics we're taking, but all of those things are potential KPIs in this phase. And then we're going to look at other phases, right? So we've got that research phase, that consideration phase for social media lifts. We're going to look at engagement rates. We're going to look at followers. We're going to look at comments, shares, visits, views to our videos. We're going to look at all of those kinds of things. Then we're going to look in our next phase, we're going to look at, maybe we've got email newsletters, open rates, remarketing ads, people coming back to our website once they've already been. We've got replies and direct messages, and all of those kinds of things live here. And then we have what I would call kind of a turning point. This is like our conversion spot, where people raise their hands, give us their information, and we have the opportunity now to sell to somebody because we have their information. We haven't necessarily known up to this point that they're interested in working with us. And so now this is the point where they fill out a form online, they maybe enter our client relationship management software, our CRM. We're looking at conversion rates, we're looking at call rates, we're looking at lead points in our CRM, right? And then they move into the sales process, and everybody's sales process is going to be a little bit different. It's not what we're talking about today, but a lot of that lives in CRM software, and you'll have KPIs along the way as well. In fact, most businesses I've talked to have very specific and very measurable KPIs in their sales process, and very and not specific and not measurable KPIs in their marketing process. So as we look at this, we want to look at it as a whole continuum, and we want to really be thinking about how do we get people through all of those steps, not just adding more at the beginning. That's a huge part of it, but also how do we make each step better? Oh, well, that's embarrassing. We should have turned that off. Sorry about that, everybody. Sorry about that. So as we look at that, we should be thinking about and looking at all of those tools as we move forward together. So sorry about that. All right. Okay. So where does that leave our return on investment conversation? Where does that leave our ROI conversation? Let's talk about the math stuff. Now, this is the math section. So I know that there's a recording coming your way, and I know that there's so I'm just disconnecting from my phone. There we go. I know that this is coming your way. I made up some numbers, and I wanted to throw some numbers on here. So what we want to do with our lead value formula, which is all leading into our return on investment formula, right? So what we wanted to do with our lead value formula is not look at the amount from a sale. We don't want to look at an average sales figure. What we want to look at is an average customer lifetime value. Right? So in our world, we have project clients, we have recurring clients, and our average customer lifetime value depends on how long our clients stay with us. And that's going to be different from a variety of different businesses, and your average customer value might be different from one thing to another, but really you want to be looking at an average across the board. So it's very simple. It's a very simple number. And then we want to look at our average close rate. And when I talk about close rate, what I'm talking about is what is the percentage of people that get from this step here, this kind of like raise your hand step where we're defining as a lead, to this step here. Now you might define a lead as people who requested a proposal. You might not count this as step one or as a lead step. You might do this, but the point is that your close rate goes from where you decide that somebody is a lead to actually giving you money, becoming a customer, and entering into that average customer lifetime value. So if I take $150,000 average customer lifetime value, multiply it by a 15% close rate, I get a $22,500 lead value. Pretty straightforward, very simple. Then I need to look at a cost per lead, right? So in marketing spend, what we're deriving at, again, all of those beginning steps of the funnel are driving to that lead spot, that kind of almost handoff spot between, marketing, quote unquote, and sales, quote unquote. And sometimes there should be a lot of conversation and bleed over between them, but this is kind of that kind of golden spot, right? So cost per lead formula, total marketing spend, and I mean total marketing spend. I don't mean like, here's my spend on Facebook, here's my spend on this, here's my spend on that. I mean, total marketing spend, vendors, trade shows, print needs, salaries, all together divided by how many leads we've gotten. And that's my cost per lead. Now, after you're done hitting kind of all of the baselines and you're looking at improving your ROI, that's when you start looking at cost per lead per channel. We're talking about that omni-channel approach. You're looking at cost per lead per channel because you're trying to drive the average down. Right? Of course, we're improving our ROI by driving our cost per lead down. But to get a baseline, you really need to know what your current cost per lead is so that you know what your target cost per lead should be on other channels. And you really need to know what you're measuring against. So let's say we have a $200,000 marketing spend. It's pretty low for an average customer value of $150,000, not going to lie. But I also really run into this in business to business as well, where people have put a lot more resources in other places and maybe a lot less into marketing. So $200,000 marketing spend, 100 leads, it's a $2,000 cost per lead. So already those of you who are thinking ahead, you're already like, gosh, if an average lead is worth $22,000, which $2,000 seems like a cheap cost per lead. Well, it actually kind of does, right? So a 15% close ratio on $150,000 lifetime value, if there's 100 leads, to calculate return on investment, I'm going to get my 15 sales or my 15 customers, right? 15% of 100 times 150,000, that's 2.25 million in lifetime value off of a $200,000 spend, right? So I take that return, I subtract my investment, I divide by my investment, and I get 10 and a quarter. So basically, what this is saying is that for every dollar I spend in marketing, my return is $10.25. That's how we calculate ROI. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple, but also really powerful, because now that I have an ROI, I get to set up a goal ROI. So I get to say, you know what, we're starting at $10, I want 12. I want $12 for every dollar I spend. And now we can talk about how to get there. So what's super cool about, actually going through all of this math, which a lot of people just don't at huge companies, they just don't go through all of this math. But what's actually cool about going through this math is we get the opportunity to now set goals, set key performance indicators, and set goals around holding not only our internal teams accountable, but holding our contractors, our vendors, and our partners accountable to these key performance indicators, holding our initiatives accountable to these key performance indicators and improvement of our return on investment. So how do we find our current ROI? Again, we define our lead, right? What is a lead to me? We define a lead value. We define a cost per lead, and that helps us identify our current ROI. Once we've identified our current ROI, we can create a target. And I would also suggest that we measure ROI quarterly. We can measure it monthly, but frankly, it doesn't move that fast because it's pretty, it's a pretty quote unquote convoluted number, but we can measure our marketing KPIs monthly. And the reason we want to kind of separate those is because KPIs as leading indicators to that ROI, boy, this is alphabet soup, but KPIs as leading indicators to that ROI is how we're going to measure our current efforts before we start to get to the point where we can actually measure what comes out on the other side of that. Okay, a lot of math, but now let's talk about making it better. So there's really a couple of ways to improve return on investment, right? There's more and there's better. Okay. More meaning we put more people into the funnel, right? So, and this is not a hugely stated thing in my industry, but I swear you spend $20,000 on ads here, 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 and you're going to get more, right? Whether it's the right more or not, you're going to get more because that's the job of advertising. But more is what comes in at the top of the funnel. Better is stopping people from leaving the funnel along the way. So we need to be thinking about both of these if we truly want to improve our return on investment. It's not just about adding more people in. It's also about making sure that we're taking the best, or we're using and taking the best advantage of that relationship along the way. And so this is where we talk about going back to those KPIs and saying, okay, so let's say that I'm going to spend $30,000 on ads. Okay. So I'm going to spend $30,000 on ads on LinkedIn or on Google or on YouTube, whatever. And I'm going to spend a $3 cost per click, 30,000 clicks. That's going to yield me somewhere in the neighborhood of 7,500 visits because, there's always attrition. People don't always let whole pages load, things like that. That's going to yield me 7,500 visits, probably a lot more followers. There'll be some other engagement statistics that go up if I've chosen to spend the money on a social platform. Of that 7,500 visits, maybe 250 people will come back along the way. Maybe that 7,500 visits lands on a really actionable landing page and I get some leads directly off of that. But maybe it's not something that people act on right away, because in B2B spaces, there's usually a lot more thought to it, right? So people have to kind of come back multiple times. So that's going to turn into 250 really interested visits, which turns into maybe 15 people filling out a lead form. So that's our $2,000 cost per lead. And by the way, that's actually a really high cost per lead. What we want to be looking at is how do we drive that cost per lead down so that we can drive our return on investment up. So if your average customer lifetime value is $50 and not $150,000, right? Everything needs to scale together, right? So as we are looking at this and looking at these KPIs, do I know that this is going to maintain our $10.25 to dollar return on investment? Yeah, because this follows along, right? It's a $2,000 cost per lead. But what happens if we drop our cost per click? If I drop that cost per click by $1, that changes my cost per lead from $2,000 to $1,300. Now that's going to change my ROI. And now I'm closer to that $12 to $1 ROI. So as we look at improvement of ROI, improvement of that along the way, we're looking at how do we not only get more coming in the top, but also how do we stopgap people from leaving along the path, right? And so robust social media using some of the omni-channel approaches that we saw with Lenovo, that we saw with Caterpillar, those kinds of pain point focused, engagement focused, user focused, asset creation, and then dissemination across multiple channels is really what we're talking about. Being in the path that people are in when they're thinking, right? So being in their way. So we do the work as a group, we all do the work for them so that we're there when they're looking. They don't necessarily need to do the extra work to seek us out, right? And that's part of the point. And that's the role of social media in this space. So how do we get more? We define our audience. We define our unique selling propositions. We be in all the paths that we can meaningfully manage with a consistent message. We talk about clients. We talk about what they are going through, what their needs are, what their pain points are. We spend money. We spend money on ads. We spend money on boosting. We spend money on things. We spend money on the assets. We spend money on the videos and the imagery and the content. We invest in our professionals, in our internal teams, and their already strong abilities to be able to understand their customers and drive things forward. And we commit to the paths that we're on. We don't do this thing where we're like, well, we'll try this for a couple of weeks, then we'll try that for a couple of weeks, and then we'll try this. And then at the end of this, then maybe nothing has changed and it's been a lot of work. So if we commit to the path that we're on, we're going to make a meaningful difference. So that's the more. What about the better? Well, the better is about listening. It's about listening to our customers. It's about listening to our clients. It's about our website user experience, that core of that hub, right? It's about the content that we share across all of those omni channels. It's about mobile load speed for sure. I mean, if the website's not loading quickly, then you're sunk no matter what you do on social media. It's about the information being easy to access. My husband buys parts for the manufacturer. He works for a small kind of machine manufacturer that he works for. And the number of times, it's probably 2-3 times a week, he's looking for parts, at night while we're watching TV, and he's on his laptop looking for sourcing different parts. And the number of times I've had, where I've heard ranting conversations about the forms don't work and nobody answered the email, and this, like, I want to buy the stuff, but the price list is 6 years old, and I gave them my contact information, but I still don't have price, or I went through their whole thing and then it says contact for whatever. And he just gets so frustrated. This is when we talk about listening and we talk about making it better. So listening to our customers, listening to the people who've decided not to be our customers that we might know of, and then making those things better on every step of that funnel. We're not making assumptions about, well, decision makers aren't on their cell phones. That's ridiculous. Or about, this is not how people do this. And well, sure, most people, but maybe not all. And so when we're doing this, being in the path that they're on is about, yes, demographics and kind of where people are at, but it's also about listening and finding out where people are on by asking the question. And it's about being in the way. Literally, it's about finding our message and being on that, on those different channels, so that when people are there, they're seeing and they're looking for us, and they're looking for our messaging, and they're looking for solutions that we provide. We stay on that list, and we stay on that list longer and long enough for us to know that we're even on the list, that we had the opportunity with them. So we listen and then we act. So this is, we're kind of nearing the end. I wanted to save a lot of time for questions. So this is the too long didn't read portion. And for those of you who maybe came a little bit behind, this will help kind of provide some context to some of the end that you saw. So understand your current efforts. Measure based on the buy cycle or the marketing funnel, whichever way you decide to look at it. There's no silver bullet. There's no one answer to making everything better. Learning costs money. And you improve ROI by exploring more and better. Or another way to put it, will answering a review on LinkedIn about your product lead to more sales? I have no idea. I can't answer that question. That's not really the question that we're looking to ask. The question that we are looking to ask is this: will engaging in conversation about your product in the space and time your customer prefers lead to more sales opportunity? It absolutely will. So thank you very much. There's my contact information if there's any follow-up, and that's what I had to share today.
Michelle, at this time, we'll open it up if we have any questions.
Hey, Michelle, it's Troy Benning.
Hi.
Hey, I'm sorry I jumped in late because I had a meeting that ran long, but so I don't know if you touched base on this though, but I like the information you shared. I've been doing a lot. We're trying to expand our marketing. We're working with a marketing firm too, with Turning Point Consulting, where I'm at currently. One of the things that I have seen a lot in my recent research, and I just don't know if you want to speak to it a little bit, because I think it'd be helpful for any company, because it seems to be true, is are you seeing it too, that intent data and web search data, so you're reaching the customers earlier in the buying process, is a very important part to this funnel, to the funnel?
Yeah, absolutely.
And when companies are budgeting and looking at that marketing, that is right now is a serious spot to be spending money. I have a marketing meeting with my CEO, CFO on the board, and it's something that I'm trying to push them for us to get some more engagements, like a bot to come in and engage on our website when people come in, so we can have call to actions in place. So I'm just wanting justification if you see that spending part of the money on that is important too.
Well, it's one of those things. It's always difficult because budgets are always limited, right? And it's always a question of where do we spend and what's the most important thing. And there's always like a new way of saying something or a new tool out there or a new thing that is the happy shiny penny that everybody's trying this year or everybody's trying next year. And the thing is this, the solid principle of being more available to your customers when they have questions, how they have questions, when and in the past is always going to do you well. And so thinking about the kinds of things that they're looking for and thinking not just about what are the buying signals, but what are the researching signals? What are the intent that are making people consider whether they're considering? Just getting in front of people earlier and more often, always going to be a good idea. So whatever ways that you have, whatever the new shiny tool is that that you're looking to committing to that path and really taking it forward is really the best way, because everything is implemented. I like to say it's based on execution. Everything is implementation specific. Every tool is there to be wielded, and it's as good as the strategy that's behind it, and it's as good as how it works. So when you're looking at those kinds of solid principles, you can adjust for anything kind of new and shiny. But when we think about intent, I think about things like conversation I had yesterday with a law firm where we were talking about the next round of their content, and they really want to focus on personal injury. And we were talking about what is going to be a little bit different. What is something that, everybody's like, well, when you have an accident, call me. Well, what if we provide resources before people have an accident? What if we provide resources, not just for people who have accidents, but people who are curious? What if we're looking at things like what are the real questions that people ask themselves? And one of the things that they keep running into is people are scared. They don't want to sue their friends or sue their neighbors. But so it's obviously there's fundamental misunderstanding in who pays in those kinds of scenarios. And so let's look at those people who are doing that research and are thinking about that intent ahead of time. So what you're talking about is absolutely, there's a lot of data out there to support getting in front of people earlier and more often is better, and being really helpful and being a part of the conversation as early as you can shows up better for people, and it helps in the long run. So I'm right there with you, and I think it's a great initiative. And again, if you've got a current return on investment number, you've got a current cost per lead number, then you can work with your team. They love those numbers, those CFOs. You work with them to set a target and then to measure that efficacy. And if you set a timeline and a target with that, you're going to get a fair shake at trying a new tool, because then at the end of that timeline, you just want to set it up so that you're setting yourself up to succeed with it. And when you really commit to the tool, I think you're gonna find some really good results.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
And just one other thing that I would like to share, just based off of my research that you kind of hit on too, is that the buying mindset of B2B has changed a little bit. It's actually more like business to customer.
Yep.
Because people are so used to getting instant answers and given information about their decisions before they actually make the decision. It's like, you might even be looking this, so here's what you might be looking for. So it's just, it's a different buying mechanism. It's not so much, because I'm from the old school, everything was knocking on doors and seeing people in person. So coming out of the IT, this is a different realm for me of trying to connect with people. But one of the
things I really appreciate you bringing that up, Troy. One of the things I like to say is that B2B marketing kind of quote unquote best practices, which I hate the phrase best, who defines what's best, but B2B best practices and B2C best practices can learn from each other in really strong ways. B2C doesn't spend a whole lot of time in any sort of justification of what they have to offer. They just kind of put it out there. And if it's self-evident, like you might like Coke or you might like Pepsi, and that's just the end of it. They don't spend a whole lot of time talking about what makes them better. So that they can learn that. Consumer brands can learn that from B2B marketing, but B2B doesn't ask for the sale. They don't ask, the calls to action are very strong. They're not asking for the information. They're not aggressive enough, typically, early enough in the process. So if what you're talking about gets the website to be more helpful, more aggressive, and more interactive, then it's definitely going to be a great tool for you.
Yeah, and I've even found that in my email campaigns, instead of the standard of here's all the awesome stuff we do, actually offering something early on in the email that they may not have time to research or to find, or just like, here's an article that you might find interesting that pertains to shipping, or, and they're like,
Yeah,
wow, okay.
absolutely. Hey, look, helpful thing, right?
Yeah.
Tom made it, and thank you, Pam, for the comment. Tom made a great point too in the chat just now. People want to buy, but they don't want to be sold. So true.
It is. Yep. Well, I appreciate your time today. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any other questions in the last few minutes that we have?
Yeah, I have a question. Thanks for the presentation, Michelle. It was really helpful. My name is Mari, and I work on the marketing team at RightSoft. And I just have a question about blogging, because that's so linked to social media. We are, focusing on blogs more this year. But sometimes it's hard to measure the success, the ROI of the blogs. And so, it helps from SEO standpoint. Basically we want to be able to use it in the sales process, with that consultative selling approach, showing that we're experts in the field as well. But how do you measure the success of your blogs? I mean, we post it on social, or we post our blogs, reshare them on LinkedIn. So we're able to see the engagement on LinkedIn. And then of course on our site as well, how many people are visiting that page. But, in your opinion, Michelle, would you say that blogs are still like a good strategy, and especially in the manufacturing world?
So I really think about it, blogs as part of an overall content marketing strategy. And that's really what you're talking about when you're talking about using them in social media and then also using them. It's really a matter of where is the hub, right? And if the hub of your wheel is on your website, then you have control of that asset, right? If the hub of your wheel is a social media platform, an algorithm changes can change everything for you and you don't control that. So in terms of measurement of blogs, I think about, again, going back to the key performance indicators along the path. So are you ever going to be able to say, so-and-so read this blog post and then bought from us? Probably not. This is about your expectation, right? And so if that's the expectation of you or your leadership team, that it's only worth doing if you can come back and say, this customer bought from us because of this thing that we wrote. There's too many X factors along the way. By the time, from the time that somebody reads a piece of thought leadership to the time that they become a client, first of all, it might be months. They might not even remember that they read it. So even if you ask, they might not remember how they first got to you. They might say, oh, I think I ran across you on a website somewhere, or I clicked a link on something in an email. Not only that, but the conversation has been, maybe somebody else on their team read the blog, right? So it's about setting up the question, setting up the expectation. So where does blog live on that? It's part of page views. I would look at page views. I would also look at engagement statistics, time on the page. And then I'd be looking at things like, does the blog offer a next step? Right? Bounce rates on blog driven websites tend to be pretty high. So that means, for example, if somebody comes in on the blog post, they're maybe going to just leave the website right off of that post. So impacting that rate or that percentage of people who don't continue to navigate through your website or don't take a next step. So what's the call to action at the end of the blog? Is it to read another blog? Is it to sign up for a white paper that maybe is in conjunction with the blog post so that you have an opportunity to collect their contact information? So I'd be looking at it again holistically. Think about it as part of the whole. And blogs take a while, right? Content marketing is not an overnight thing. Yes. And they also are more powerful. Articles are more powerful in mass than maybe each individual part. So it's almost like the whole makes up more than the sum of its parts when you're talking about like a resource center on a website or articles, or in your case, blogs. So I'd be really thinking about a couple of different things to maximize efficacy. I'd be thinking about, how do I combine those blog posts into themes and then create white papers that I can use as a lead generation tool on an ad landing page? How do I rewrite that blog post a little bit, maybe 30-40%, and recreate it as a LinkedIn article associated with one of our leadership team or executives? How do I take that one piece of content maybe add some graphics to it, and use parts and pieces of infographics with that same blog link over and over and over on my LinkedIn account, right? So how do I take that one asset that we created and use it 6 different ways across the next 7 months? And then how do I theme those things and think about them in total? So when you're thinking about this, it's really about framing the question, because if the question is framed as, this blog post, did it get us a customer? Frankly, nothing is going to be successful.
Yeah.
But if it's framed as, this is how content marketing fits into our overall marketing strategy, and this is the return on investment of our marketing strategy, and these are the tools that we're going to use to impact that return on investment, that's what we're talking about. So it's thinking about it more holistically to make sure that you're setting yourself up to succeed.
Definitely. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And they love the numbers. Just drown them with math. Everybody loves numbers.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other final thoughts or questions? Great. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining today. And just a reminder that the session was recorded today, so I will send a link out to everybody that registered via email. And it also can be found on the association web pages under events. So I want to give a big thanks to Michelle again from Bad Cat Digital for taking part in our marketing series and for a great presentation today.
Thank you, everybody, for attending. Really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Michelle. Have a great day. Good seeing you again.
Thanks. Good seeing you. Nice background.
Thank you.